Hello, Pastor Jeremy again here with Daily Bread. So, as we are looking to read the Bible in a year, our project for being able to talk about the Bible together and the community that hopefully we can form around being able to discuss this important book. So, let's get into it. We are looking at January 3rd, 2020. This is day number 3, Genesis chapter 9 through 12. So, we ended with chapter 8 talking a little bit about God promising never to destroy the earth by a flood again and saving Noah and his family. But we're looking at chapter 9 now, and God specifically making a covenant. So I should be noted that in Hebrew, the word for making a covenant is to literally cut a covenant. That what they did is, each part of the agreement that made the covenant, that cut the deal, they would contribute something to that. Humans would often contribute some sort of animal sacrifice. Now, in our day and time, that's something that's very much discouraged. We as Christians believe that Jesus was the final sacrifice to end the sacrificial system. But that is very much prevalent in the Old Testament because the idea was that as we see here in Genesis chapter 9, that it's essentially blood for blood, that your lifeblood, especially whenever you sin, that you bring guilt upon other blood, and through offering blood that you will be able to make amends and restore the right balance in the midst of that. That the animal is in some sense a sacrifice of yourself in your stead, in your place, because the demand for justice and righteousness in some ways connects to a demand for blood as well too. So it's fascinating. It's not something that we modernly kind of think so much about, but we have this cutting of the covenant with Noah and his kids there through the blood, and so they're warned not to spill somebody's blood to take another life like what Cain did to Abel, their ancestor, but that God has a sense of balance when it comes to our life and the way that we interact with one another, and that even goes down to our sense of blood as well. So, and then God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant that I've established between me and all flesh, all blood that is on the earth." So God promises that, in fact, that he will not destroy the earth by a flood ever again. We see Noah and his sons interact, and there is a very strange interaction with, quote-unquote, seeing Noah naked. There's a lot that could be said about that, and there's been a lot of history of justification around who is right and who is wrong, and used to specifically say that slavery in the United States could be justified around the sense of the cursing of Cana. So anyways, this is very strange. Just a very strange text around Cana, and there's a lot going on. I know, depending upon what time period, Cana can often be the challenge and the opposing force to the Israel community. So the Israelites who develop later on, the people of God. So there's probably something setting up about this animosity with Cana, and Cana doing something hideous in the eyes of the descendants who are going to read the story about their ancestors. So anyways, as you can tell, ancestry is very important. So they document, especially in Genesis, they're documenting all the people who are born, and the ancestry lines that come after that. You'll see that continued through the Old Testament, that ancestry is very important. Even into the New Testament, you'll see that Jesus, his ancestry, in the different, if focusing in both Luke and the ancestry in Matthew, kind of focus two different subtle differences, but even still, they believe that ancestry was very important, even for Jesus, the Son of God. So, in chapter 11, we look at the Tower of Babel, in the story in which humanity is united in a common language, and they want to build not something for God, but again, they want to build for themselves. They are ignoring God hard here. And the Lord, comes and tries to look at this small, insignificant thing that they're building, even though that, it's very grand in the eyes of humanity, and they are trying to make and marvel in their own accomplishments. I think the danger for us is whenever we become too proud of our accomplishments or a world. This is a warning about that, because the warning is that God comes down and scatters their languages and that they're not able to be unified. And that's a way to explain that there are different languages here on earth. And the reason that the writer is trying to say that there are different languages which come about here in the world that we live in. So the Lord was not pleased that they were doing it for themselves, and so scattered them. And then we again, in chapter 11, have some ancestry and descendants leading up to this guy called Abram. Abram is another key figure, and he will be a huge figure throughout all of the story of the Bible, because he is the one who gets promised important things, especially that he will be the father of nations, and that he will have the land and occupy the promised land, which we will come to understand a little bit later when we keep reading through all of this. But Abraham is a very important figure, and Abraham is important in a lot of ways because he listens to God. In verse 1 of chapter 12, he says, "Now the Lord said to Abram, 'Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land I will show you. For I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great,'" which will become kind of Israelite, "so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." This is definitely setting up the Israelite people, which will later on evolve into the Jewish community, where that sets up the New Testament and Jesus being a Jew, and Christians coming from that line and lineage of this Israelite and Abrahamic community. So Abraham also has Ishmael as a son. We'll look a little bit more into that and see how the Muslim community kind of gets created through the Christian lens, through the lens that we have of the Bible. And we'll look into the character of Ishmael through the biblical story a little bit later. We see that Abraham is told to go, and he goes. And Abraham appears to him and says, "You and your offspring, I will give you this land." So the theme of land becomes very important. And Abraham wants to take this own promise into his own hands, as we see at the verse 10 coming up. When Abraham and his wife Sarai, they go to Egypt. And Abraham deceives, he hides the truth, would be the easiest way to put it. Hides the truth about Sarai being his wife, and in order to deceive the king of Egypt, because he is afraid that this promise will not come to fruition if he dies. That's a good fear to have, being afraid of a king and a power who might take offense at you and decide to kill you because your wife is a very beautiful woman, as it says. So anyways, we see at the end of 12 that they resolve the issue with Pharaoh, and they are kicked out of Egypt. So Abraham goes on wandering there in verse 13. Is there anything that's strange that stands out to you? Anything that I missed? Anything you'd like to add? Well, please connect with me so that way we can be able to carry on this conversation. Thank you for joining me for day 3.